My name is Chuck Bull. I'm the director of the Masters in Real Estate Development and Urbanism program based in the School of Architecture. We partnered on the annual conference with the School of Business since the beginning, and we have a great interdisciplinary environment going on. We'll talk a little more about later. Right now, we're going to take just a few minutes. This is our second annual survey that we've completed, engaging more than 100 advisory board members between architecture, business, and the law schools, all in real estate, as well as many of you who are here in the audience. About 250 real estate professionals were engaged this year, very highly experienced. And we're just going to give you a teaser of some of the results, and then you'll have a chance to download it. I want to welcome the group up. This year, in addition to just looking at market trends, we had a special focus on resiliency, which is what our advisory board was interested in. So I'm going to let them tell you the results themselves. So I'd like to invite Mark Trone, Professor Trone, up to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Bow. And if the students can just come up behind me, that'd be great. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're thrilled to present the second annual Real Estate Sentiment Survey that the University of Miami has done. And the MRED students this year have done a fabulous job. And what I'd like to do is actually, first of all, just make sure that we thank our research sponsor, and that's Anthony Graziano over there from Integra Realty Resources. They were essential to making us have the success that we've had so far. So as Dr. Bow mentioned, we had a focus which was twofold this year. The markets that we looked at last year and that many of you participated in a survey to tell us about, and resiliency, which certainly is the hot topic for this particular year. So we're going to go through some of these bullet points. This is really just a snapshot for our survey for this year. And I'd like to start off actually with Chandler. We're going to go down the line here. And I'd like Chandler to tell us about the key findings that we found with the real estate market survey this year.
So for this year in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County, the results are showing that overwhelmingly higher for growth and expansion in the South Florida region. And we are lessing votes than the...
Well, thanks, Chandler. Well, let's now move to Nick, actually. And Nick is going to discuss basically the future of real estate development. And we want to see what our respondents thought were the most effective physical approaches to improving resiliency.
So the biggest takeaway from this question is that the top 4 choices selected all have to do with larger scale global solutions. Constructing at higher elevations, redeveloping infrastructure, and building near public transit. Whereas the bottom 4 all have to do with individual site-specific solutions. Thus, respondents recognize that an effective approach to improving resiliency is on a communal and community-based approach.
Great, well, thank you very much. So let's move on to Joe, and let's explore climate gentrification and see if higher elevations really are something that investors and developers are seeking.
So the data shows that climate gentrification is more coincidental than intentional in that this development is more motivated by financial opportunity and lower acquisition costs than the looming risk of climate change and sea level rise.
Great, thank you. Now let's go to Nick and also look at what approaches seem to be the best way to improve resiliency. What are the factors that our respondents talked about?
Okay, so our respondents indicated that the driving factors for investment in resilient development were some form of governmental or municipal tax incentives, expedited approval process, or some form of development bonuses. These 3 were the significant leading categories compared to the lagging.
And now let's move to Sam. And not only did we look at approaches, but we actually looked at how people might prefer to pay for those approaches. Sam.
Our top 2 responses were raising roads and infrastructure and building seawalls, indicating a preference for preparing the overall built environment for sea level rise. Site-specific strategies, such as adapting or buying out individual properties, received fewer responses.
Great, thank you. So that's really just a snapshot, and I want to make sure everybody understands that not only do we have the leadership of Dr. Bowl, but these students, there were 8 of them, were integral to our success, and I encourage you to mix, mingle, and to network with them because they're really going to become leaders in their field. Finally, let me make sure again that you know that we really appreciate what not only IRR did, but a special thank you to Anthony Williams, Ben Dixon, and Amandi, because their research efforts and their understanding of statistical analysis was also really important. So, a final slide. It's really all about the information that you can download on our real estate website. And that is at miami.edu/reimpact. There we go. And if you click on the research tab, you'll get not only the copies of this year's report, you can look at last year's report to compare as well. So thank you very much. We hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Back to Dr. Bowl.
Obviously, the survey was completed prior to the coronavirus buzz that we've had today. Before I do the introductions, a shout out first to my chair, Nitin Motwani, for the MRED Advisory Board and the advisory board members throughout the audience. You are a fantastic group, and not just for your support of the conference. Our advisory board members are in the classroom. We do site visits with them. They're in our speaker series. They are involved in mentorship, internships, and they hire an awful lot of our graduates. So you're really instrumental in the lives of the students in the program, and we greatly appreciate everything you do. Thank you. So I had the pleasure of, I'll do a brief introduction to the Hines panel here. Hines, as a company, certainly needs no introduction. It's a privately owned global real estate investment, development, and management firm, founded in 1957, with a presence in 219 cities. The program says 23 countries. I heard 24 over lunch, so that's grown. I also mentioned in our conversations how I'd had the pleasure to meet Gerald Hines right at the very beginning of our program 10 years ago. We participated as a school in the Hines competition, which we do each year. We had one team, and out of those 130 teams, we were very fortunate we made it to the final 4. But what really struck me when I went to Denver with the students, they made their presentations, was that Gerald came around to each and every one of those 4 teams. He sat down at the tables. He spent time with them individually, asking them about their aspirations and their interests, where they were thinking of going with their careers, and it really left a great impression on our students and on me, kind of coming away from that. And having just spent a little time with the next 2 generations, I think that genuineness and care for the future generation really comes across strongly, and greatly appreciated that. So on our panel, we have Jeff Hines, President and CEO of Hines. He oversees a portfolio that includes more than $124 billion of assets and management, and oversees the firm's domestic and international acquisition program. During his tenure, the firm has grown from less than 500 employees to more than 4,400 employees in those 24 countries they're working in. He is joined by Laura Hines Pierce, who's Senior Managing Director in the Office of the CEO at Hines, and works alongside the CEO to help shape firm-wide strategy, manage key risks, and ensure Hines is consistently on the leading edge of being the best real estate investor partner and manager in the world. And moderating this discussion, we have Alfonso Monk, currently Chief Investment Officer of the Americas for Hines. And we also want to thank Alfonso for bringing this panel together for us, and welcome to each of you. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I was pretty encouraged about doing this session today until somebody whispered in my eye, or whispered in my ear a few minutes ago. It's like, you have a lot of courage bringing your owners on a 4:30 panel on a Friday to talk. What are you going to ask them? And you guys don't know, but I've only been with Hines for about 4 months, so I'm starting to get to know them. Now I'm going to have to cut half of the questions because I'm not concerned about some of them, and we'll see how, we'll see what happens on Monday if I have to go to the office or not. If I still have I'll try and do my best. I'm honored here to have Jeff and Laura. Obviously, I've been working with the firm for about 4.5 months, but have worked with them as operating partners for a long time. And when they asked me to join the firm, it was a very easy decision because it's a firm that requires no introduction, as was said. Let's start with you, Jeff. The firm, as it was mentioned, was created 63 years ago by your dad. Can you share a little bit about the background, how your dad launched the firm, and how he grew the business from a one-person shop to 40, to the thousands of employees that we have today?
Well, Dad worked as a mechanical engineer for an air conditioning company, and he was having a backdoor barbecue, and one of his neighbors said, Jerry, I need to build a 5,000 square foot warehouse for my business. And Dad said, well, let me build it for you. And that was sort of the start. I mean, he did a few deals on the side, then started. In terms of the growth, we really stay at a pretty small, really local, mostly Houston-based firm doing industrial projects, et cetera. And then in the late 60s, Dad took on two big projects. One of them is the Galleria, which is a huge mixed-use project in the Post Oak area, very, very successful mall to this day. And the other was, after, I think the tallest building Dad had ever built was a 10-story apartment building. He convinced Shell to be the tenant in a 50-story building in downtown Houston. So he took on those two projects at one time. He said the ranch was absolutely bet on those projects, and luckily they did well. But we became known as a firm that was capable and specialized in doing large, complex projects. And then the other thing that really propelled growth was, I see some of the students with the book, but it really explains well. Dad is really, I think, credited, rightfully so, with being the person that married great architecture with the office building. Because back in the 60s, office buildings were pretty generic, and the thinking was you couldn't afford to bring great architecture to the office space. All the great architects worked on college campuses or museums, et cetera. But Dad really figured out the formula of not just letting the architect do what he wants, but very actively working with the architect to create a product that would be leasable and efficient. And yes, you're going to have a cost premium, but to really manage the cost premium so that it wasn't exorbitant. But so he really figured out that formula, and we became known. Really, Pennzoil Place in Houston earned the New York Times Architecture Project of the Year, and we became known for a firm that was associated with great architecture. And at the time, in the 70s and early 80s, banks were using architecture as one of their main marketing tools to get their image out in the city. And so we got calls from various banks in various parts of the U.S., and then so we started forming offices to build them. Southeast Financial Center was here in Miami, was one of those projects that was done during that period. So that really propelled our growth throughout the U.S., and then we decided to go international, and that's how we got there.
Great. And you, Laura, obviously you see your grandfather still sometimes at the office. I see him sometimes. He comes to Houston every once in a while and still talks about
94 years old.
94 years old. So it's great to be with him. What makes him tick? And what do you think about what he's done to innovate the product?
Yeah, I think a lot of it. Dad made reference to it, but I think a lot of it was originally born out of his background as a mechanical engineer. And he really believed that you could dive deeply into the design, and in doing so, just get incredible quality if you really pushed on that front. And then, I think the other piece was that he always has taken the long-term view. And so when, I think that's really what framed up his view that you could bring high quality design, high quality architecture, high quality mechanical systems to the building because you're investing in your building for the long term. And he always believed higher quality buildings will stay full longer. And I think we see that in the Southeast Financial Center that was built as long
36 years ago.
When I was born,
right.
And I think that that's really played out. I think he's also beyond the buildings. He brought that perspective to partnerships and has always brought a level of integrity to his partnerships and the way he does business, thinking, again, always for the long term. And so, I think that's been really core to what our company has become, sort of a combination of quality and integrity and, always thinking about the long term.
Great. I wish we had your dad here to have the 3 generations. But talking about generations, Jeff, how do you get him to work in real estate? Did he twist your arm, your dad, to come over to work at the company? How did it happen?
If he would have twisted my arm, I would have run the other way. I mean, absolutely not. He did not push, rightfully so. And I was pre-med for a while in college, and I really didn't decide I was going to go into the business until business school. So.
That said, I do think he brought you to a couple construction sites at 5 a.m.
That's true. I was exposed to the business. I was definitely exposed to the business. So.
How about you, Laura? He's here. Did he twist your arm to get to come to the company?
Well, I was never brought to a construction site at 5 a.m. because I think that would have turned me off pretty quickly. No, I would say, if anything, the opposite. I think that my dad and my mom, who's here as well, I think made a really conscious effort to, make sure that we were given a lot of space when we grew up and weren't, the business wasn't forced on us in any way. If anything, we were kept a little bit arm's length. And I think what that really did was, for me, certainly, and I think I can speak for my siblings too, it really gave us the space to explore, our own interests. When I went to college, I was a double major in economics and art history, and spent the first couple of years out of college exploring what had developed as a really strong interest of mine in the intersection of both in the art market at Sotheby's. But I'd always had an interest in real estate and saw it as another way to get a little bit of my left brain, right brain working in the way that I liked. And so, when I did come back to real estate, it was because I knew that was where I really wanted to be and had a deep interest for it. So I think it was really important.
Talk about leaving space. The history of Heinz, your dad, when you became president 30 years ago, he purposely left and went to Europe to grow the business there and left you in charge of the company. At that point, what are the major achievements? What do you do with the company and turn it from a 500-employee company to where it is now over the last 3 decades? How do you do that?
And Laura, don't get any ideas. I'm not moving to Europe, so sorry, I'm going to be around. Well, I would reshape the premise of your question. The premise of your question would sort of say, what have I done to grow the company? Our firm does not work in the sense that the CEO says go left and everyone goes left. It is very much much more a consensual-driven organization. All the senior leadership agrees on a direction, and it's the very rare case where I direct. But in terms of what's happened since 1990, I would say the big things are, in 1990, we were basically a U.S. CBD office building developer. That's what we were. So I think what we have morphed into over that time is to become a fiduciary, to become an investment manager. And so, and I can still remember the discussion like it was yesterday. In the early 90s, we had these almost 2 years of discussions about, do we buy someone else's building? I mean, this sounds really silly now, but the discussion was, why would we ever want to buy a building that we didn't build? I mean, we were a little cocky. By definition, it was going to be of lower quality. So, but we did get into that. We started to raise a few funds, and we saw the power of it. We saw that we could bring our development skill sets and our management skill sets, because we do property management on all our projects. We could bring those to an asset we bought as well as develop. So, that really worked well. And I would say the other thing that we have done in a big way since the 1990 is to get into other product types. Half of what we do now is non-office, so that's been a major change, and it's been pretty easy to translate some of the skills we have in our offices all around the globe, because we've got people who live and breathe those markets. They know every street corner, they know which brokers to talk to, so they know how to get zoning done and understand the zoning in all these places. So those skill sets are just as applicable in building a high-rise multifamily project as well as doing a high-rise office. So I'd say those have been the major changes at Hines since 1990.
So now moving forward, Laura, you've been promoted this year to the office of CEO, and obviously the firm is taking a new leadership in place, third generation. Give us a snapshot of how the firm looks now, and if your dad's not there, where do you take it in the future to do a better job than your dad?
Be there for a while.
Yeah. One day.
Well, I think, and I think we, agree on a lot of the opportunity, a lot of potential for the firm. I think, a lot of what was started in, the 90s and the last, 20 or 30 years is really where we're continuing to press into now. So I'd say first our investment management business, and I think that's been a huge focus of ours. It's been a huge part of propelling the growth, and certainly a big opportunity we see. It's part of how, part of bringing you on board, I think, and what we're so excited about there. And then, continuing to grow across asset classes, I think, has been really strategically important for us, not just because of the opportunity we see to translate skill sets, but also because the cycles for the different asset classes move in completely different ways. And we have these really powerful teams on the ground who have the ability to continue to create opportunity, but to be able to turn on and off levers for those teams at different points in the cycle, I think is something that we'll continue to press into. And then, as I think about, for me, where real estate is going, and I think what is really exciting for us is some of the changes relative to how you create value at a building. We, as Dad mentioned, do operations and property management through our assets. We've recently started multifamily property management as well, in addition to the other asset classes. And, that world is changing very quickly. And what it means to create value, not just through how you manage the building, but also through technology, through an understanding of data, and then through the physical asset as well, I think is changing very quickly. And the more we can be on the front edge of that, the more we can really understand what our end user, what our tenants are asking for, I think is really going to drive how we design buildings, what buildings we buy, how we operate them, how we redevelop them, and I think really having a focus on that is going to be key for us moving forward.
By the way, Jeff, I'm not trying to get rid of you by implying that she's taking over. Okay, I won my job on Monday. So you're one of the largest private real estate firms in the world, and it is rare to see a company of the size of Heinz, still be 100% family-owned and not tempted by the public markets. Obviously, this week is probably a week that you wouldn't be tempted by the public markets.
It's a pretty good time.
You're happy not
pretty
being
good
public.
example. Yeah.
So, we saw Debbie's, the volatility that you will get will be impressive. But how you kept the company, the essence of the firm intact, and I'm assuming you've been tempted or you've evaluated going public, and why haven't you done it in the past?
Well, we've definitely had the opportunity to go public many a time, and there's several reasons. I think first and foremost is we really view real estate as a long-term business and not one that should be affected or managed to quarterly earnings sort of perspective. So, Deb might disagree with that, but that's our perspective. And quite frankly, it's. I think we can maintain the culture. We can invest in people. We can make investments that I think public firms would have trouble justifying on a short-term basis because our time frame is really long. So I think that does allow us to one of the things about maintaining the culture is having employees that we have a very intentional strategy of having people at the firm stay a long time because we think that is what helps further the culture of the firm and is really the glue that holds everything, holds a far-flung real estate empire together. And so we can do things from a compensation perspective, et cetera, that probably wouldn't be done in a publicly traded company because we do have that perspective. So, at least in generation 2, we're not going public. So.
I'm not going to ask the question. Generation 3, I don't want to get in more trouble already. So let that question, I'll ask him.
Perspective doesn't change.
Yeah, in private. But talking about the Heinz in the future, Laura, I said earlier, most of people, even when I joined, quite frankly, I've been in real estate for a while, we always knew Heinz was the dead developer of office space. And obviously Southeast Financial Center, you guys know here in Miami. We're really, and I say we because now I'm part of the family, we're really doing a lot of other products. And particularly, I've seen Heinz mention the convergence of products because we're big believers in that. And in the non-office world, how do you see those products converging? What are we focusing on? And maybe you want to use some examples, right? Because we have projects around the world that are like that, right?
Yeah. No, I think it's the other sort of big strategic reason that we have really been pressing into all asset classes is that, the opportunities that we're seeing and how those opportunities are really coming together. I think that's sort of happening in a couple different ways. One, that you're seeing, uses or the way, the expectations of a certain product type transfer to another. And so the most obvious one of that is how hospitality is really seeping into expectations for office tenants, for multifamily. We're even seeing that to a degree in industrial, actually, because there are employers who have employees that work in industrial sites as well that, they are hoping to keep engaged and wanting to come to work. And so we're seeing that transfer there. I think additionally really starting to see uses converge, and I think we're really at the beginning of that, but certainly seeing how industrial and retail, you could start to see it again at the beginning of what that could look like, and how is Amazon going to start thinking about their Whole Foods locations, and how does that continue to evolve? And then I think just the convergence of value creation when assets when uses really come together. So in sort of mixed use sites, and I think one close to home is Miami World Center, and I think we've seen a real in looking across our portfolio, real value creation when those uses come together and really play off of each other. And I think we're really pushing hard into mixed use, and being able to really sort of create space in doing that and create placemaking through that. I think is something that we're really focused on, across the board. So,
and talking about create spaces, Laura, one thing that the firm is very big on as we create new spaces and redesign the cities is the sustainability aspect, and how we not only look at the economics of the deals, but we look at what impact it creates in communities, how sustainable they are. Obviously we like the returns. What's your view on that? Because obviously we're spending a lot of time discussing it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say sustainability has been sort of a core aspect of Hines, all the way back to, again, going back to my grandfather's roots as a mechanical engineer. He was very passionate about, finding opportunities for efficiency in our mechanical systems and the way you run buildings. Not only because of it's the right thing to do and it's a positive impact on the environment, but it also saves money. It's a better run building, and so it's really been a core part of Hines. We were part of developing the LEED specs back when they were developed, and have been really sort of focused on Energy Star, and it's been a big part of what we've done. I'd say looking forward, that's not enough. I think LEED probably doesn't go far enough. We're now looking at, we're at the beginning of looking at, what would it take to start to develop new net zero buildings? What would it take to, take an existing building and get it to net zero? We're really at the outset of that. We have actually developed a net zero building in San Diego where conditions are a bit more favorable for that. But I'd say there's still a ways to go. We've pushed into timber construction as well with a product we call T3 that certainly has a lower carbon footprint. But I do think there's a huge responsibility on the real estate industry because the built environment is an incredible part of the carbon outlay of the world, both on the construction side and then the operating buildings. And I think we have a responsibility really to lead on that front.
Great. I had questions on politics which are banned because I want to have my job on Monday, so I raised those, so don't dare to ask questions about politics. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that are close to them, but not necessarily about politics. One is, and we've been we're present in opportunity zones, and we invest in opportunity zones. I want to get your view, Jeff, on the prospects of that and how we invest. And the second one tied to it is the theme surrounding rent controls. And we develop a lot of housing in major metropolitan areas, obviously New York and San Francisco, and we're seeing a lot of rent controls being either enacted, put in place in Berlin, for instance. Do you think this is going to hamper our ability to develop in some of these regions? And what's your view on that? Opportunity zones, rent controls, which are enacted by governments at the end of the day, right?
Right. Opportunity zone, first of all, I would say is, I believe it's really bad public policy. Anything you do to artificially affect the market forces for real estate, I think is a problem. I mean, it sort of feels like accelerated depreciation of the 80s, which led to overdevelopment. And so I think it's bad public policy. And there are quite a few deals that we have that are in opportunity zones. I mean, I would also say the opportunity zones have been allowed to be picked by the states, which generally have put them in areas that may not be serving the real purpose that was originally intended for opportunity zones. And we do not go and look for opportunity zone deals. We look for deals that make sense. Yeah, if they're in an opportunity zone, that's helpful to the process, and that helps the economics. We are not changing our formula to adapt to opportunity zones. Rent control, again, another bad public policy decision, I think, but I think it is a real, there is a real chance in some markets that it will be enacted in some way, shape, or form, and yeah, that's going to have an impact on the real estate markets, and especially on the provision of new space going forward.
Great. And talking about Laura, new focuses of the firm, because I think you're also been big on this, and I think it's of interest of some of the people here in the room, is diversity and inclusion, gender equality. How is it impacting commercial real estate? You obviously female in the sector, and what are going to be your efforts or the firm's efforts into hiring and promoting more women and more diversity, which I know is part of the core of the firm.
Sure. I think as an industry, real estate is not there yet. But I do think, and I personally have been very encouraged by how much a part of the conversation it is now, and that is sort of the first step. And I would say both of those statements apply to Hines. We are not there yet, but it is a huge part of the conversation and a huge part of where we're going. I think that we internally have really shifted and had a big focus on diversity and inclusion over the past 4 or 5 years. A lot of that started, honestly, as grassroots, and really sort of which is actually, Dad mentioned it earlier, but a big part of our culture is a lot of bottom up as well as top-down ideas coming together and finding those best ideas. And this was one of them. And it was really a grassroots effort, formation initially of a women's network that has expanded into a full diversity and inclusion effort. I think that we are really focused on, and it's great to hear University of Miami is doing a lot of this, really focused on starting to reach people much earlier, really at the high school and certainly college level, to even introduce the idea of real estate as a career. I think a lot of people historically have gotten into real estate when their family has been in real estate. I think that's been a very typical path for a lot of people. A lot of people don't even realize that real estate is a career, let alone how broad that the industry is in terms of ways to participate in it. And so, I think we're really focused on that and we have programs with high school students, with college, with particular groups that are focused on, like Forte, that are focused on certain diverse groups and just starting to even introduce the idea of real estate and Hines as a place that you can do that. But I think we have a long way to go. And then I think the other piece is just, the more we can do in terms of sponsorship and mentorship internally, because I think you can get people in the door, but you also have to support them up through to leadership.
Agreed. Jeff, what's something that you consider is exciting happening in real estate, and what is something you're concerned about that keeps you awake up nights?
Well, I think a couple of things are exciting for Hines. One is data. We are just at the beginning of figuring out how we can use the vast amount of data that we have in our system, and both on the sort of performance side, but also on the operating side of assets. There's a huge amount that we can get, and we're employing some experts in the field to really help us get at that data. So I can't even tell you what we're going to be able to do with it, but I fully expect that that's a really valuable asset for us that we're just at the, as I say, initial stages of starting to take advantage of. I think the other is technology. It's finally arrived in the real estate world in a big way, and it's changing things very, very quickly and allowing some great opportunities. On the flip side of that, one of the things that keeps me up at night is what impact could technology have on our business? How could it disintermediate us? And what if people have different working habits and really do all work from home? What will driverless cars do to the whole equation? So those are big concerns too. And until like a week or two ago, this wasn't a concern, but coronavirus is certainly a major concern at this point. And we have operations in China, and that I think everyone in the U.S. is a little, and I'm at fault also of sort of that's so far away. I mean a little so far removed that it really is not going to have an impact. Well, what really I think has sort of woken us up is what's gone on in Europe this week and the response to Milan. I mean, Milan has shut down. We have a big office in Milan. Everyone is working from home. Restaurants are closed at night. Bars are closed. I mean, the city is shut down, and people are not flying to that office anymore. And so we just yesterday imposed, A, you have to get permission from your boss to travel anywhere, fly anywhere. B, if you've been to one of 6 countries that has outbreaks, you probably are going to have to self-quarantine. Just yesterday, we canceled our attendance at MIPIM, which is, for the students in the group, that's the biggest real estate conference in Europe, 27,000 people in Cannes, which is about an hour's drive from Italy. We, along with many other firms, are canceling. That's in like a week and a half. My guess is 30 days from now, if this conference were happening 30 days from now, pretty good chance it might not happen. I mean, it's, if we get a pod like that, like Milan in the U.S., I mean, we're going to have a reaction. People are freaking out in Europe. And it's the reason we're not doing the MIPIM conference is not really because, sorry, got problems with the mic. Are not really because people are worried about getting sick. They're worried about getting stuck, where they travel there and then really aren't allowed to travel back. Again, like some of the early, I don't know where this is going. I'm not a doctor, but you can paint some pretty bleak scenarios, and people are the reaction. It may be overreaction by a lot of people, but it's real. It's a real reaction that's happening out there. So, real estate's had a long run, and we've all sort of been wondering what black swan event might push us into a different part of the cycle. And I am really concerned that this is something that is going to push us into
So Jeff, talking about
decline.
black swan events and obviously you worked at the firm for 30 years, you've seen downturns, and this could potentially be it, right? I mean, who knows? It could not be. It could just be so. But let's say, you've learned about mistakes in the past, and particularly in times like this, you have to be very careful what you do and not do. We had investment committee this week, and we're already talking about it, of not making certain investments. What are your lessons learned from the times that you've gone through volatility like this? Yeah. What should the firm do to not make mistakes, right? Yeah. Like we're done in, say, the global financial crisis. It could be another one coming, right?
Yeah. So. Well, I'd say the last major crisis we had, 2006, 2007, 2008, we made the mistake of buying too late into the cycle and made the mistake of going down the quality curve to try and get increased return. And those were both mistakes. And so we have really modified, we made a major change for our firm. All decisions, all deals had basically been bought. Our regions are so strong and so powerful. Deals came from the bottom up, and investment decisions came from the bottom up, from the field. There was no macro sort of look at what was going on. We never had a research department. We brought in an incredible group of people that is our research department now, and we very much have market views on things and have changed our behavior based on what our research group says. For instance, over the last couple of years, we've made a big change to move some of our buy acquisition structures or our development structures from sort of a merchant build or a merchant buy to much more of a long-term hold perspective, and that's really based on the research. So we now, our decision-making practice now is very much a combination of bottom-up and top-down, and that's it's already showing well. We look at alpha and beta, and beta traditionally we haven't been able to add much. Since we've had the research department, we add about 180 basis points on the beta side. So it's been a major plus.
Great. Let's turn it to better, more more optimistic news. Hopefully everything will go away associated with what's going on in the environment right now, and then we'll continue to be a firm that's very active in the real estate. And to the audience, particularly the students here, we're a big recruiter in a lot of colleges. Obviously, the most important asset of the firm is the talent that we have, and Jeff and Laura always say that to our team. Laura, what's your advice to those students here about getting into real estate? Why real estate is a rewarding career? You got into it, right? Obviously, what would you tell them? How to position themselves?
Yeah, I think, for me, the way I've viewed real estate, I mentioned it earlier, I feel a little bit like someone who's a little left brain, a little right brain, and not a ninja at either, but I like to straddle it. And for me, what's been so fantastic about real estate is that it really affords you the opportunity to exercise all interests in all parts of your brain in that sense. So everything from design, construction, finance, marketing, sales, it's legal. You really are touching so many aspects, and then I think there's also just the fact that it is it's physical, and there's you can really touch and feel how you're making an impact, how you're impacting your communities, and I think there's a real desire to make a positive impact on your communities, and through real estate you really feel and see that. I think that in terms of getting into real estate, I think doing things like this are incredibly valuable because it's always been said it is a relationship business. I think what that really means is it's a business where people do want to help each other. They want to foster people up through the industry. It's a close-knit community, and I think that spending time with people, getting any experience you can in doing so, is a big part of it.
Great, and obviously we're in Miami, and before we run out of time, I want to ask Jeff also, and Laura, we've been here for 35 years. We mentioned Southeast Financial Center 36 years ago. Some people might feel they haven't seen enough of Heinz in Miami. but we're bringing you guys out here. There's a team of Heinz professionals on the audience as well. You know, we've done more than what people think. We're just not a big advertisers on what we do in Miami. What's your view about the projects we've done? What's your view about Miami? Obviously, the growth, we're hearing a lot, and what do you think the firm will be good doing going forward, right, in Miami?
Yeah, no, I think we will be active in Miami going forward for sure. I mean, I think, you know, you heard some of the other comments about Miami earlier, and I totally agree with them. It's an amazing city, very dynamic, very diverse, with, you know, a lot going on. And you know, some of the things we're hearing about at lunch in terms of the entry of tech into Miami, and it's all very, very exciting. And you know, I think now that, I mean, we weren't that active for a while because building 50-story office buildings, at least for a while, wasn't the right thing to do in Miami. Well, now that we're in other product types, we've already done, I think, 3 multifamily projects in the area, some smaller office, and you know, would hope to do a much broader array of things. So, you know, we're you know, as Alfonso mentioned, we've got you know, our team here, and they know their marching orders.
Yeah, and we've done pretty cool things like he's the development manager of the New World Symphony Miami, where it's a pretty interesting Frank Gehry architect sort of design project, so people might not know, but we get involved in a lot of projects. And then we're going to do the ULI Gerald Heinz urban design competition later in April here in Miami, if it doesn't get canceled, hopefully, which will put a more stronghold on it. Right. I want to also talk a bit about non-work stuff, and also, well, I guess both of you, I'll start with you, Laura. Any cool projects that you worked with Heinz that you're very proud of, and also, second, tell us a little bit what you do when you're not working.
I feel like everything I've done has been cool, so I don't know how to answer that. No. You know, I will say my first couple of years with Heinz were spent as a project manager for an office tower development in Chicago, which I sometimes joke is my baby. And so, you know, that will always hold a special place in my heart. But, you know, in the past couple of years, I've gotten a chance to, my title up until recently has been Transformation Officer. And as part of that, I led and worked with the team to, you know, really over the course of a year and a half, look at our investment management business and really think about how to set ourselves up for what we see as an opportunity in the market to really bring our platform that we feel really knows how to create value at the asset, that alpha that my dad mentioned, and really bring that holistically to our investors through, you know, a broad investment management platform. In order to do that, you know, we really had to take a platform that had evolved over 30 years and relook at the organization, the personnel, the compensation, culture, process, strategy, and sort of rework it all. It was a lot. I certainly did not know what I was getting into when I helped to take that on, but it was part of how we got Alfonso on board, and so really excited with where that's ended, and you know, really proud looking back, I think, about that. In terms of what I do outside of work, I travel a lot, although maybe a little less in the coming months. And I like to ski, I like to scuba dive, and in theory I golf. I haven't done it in a while.
How about you, Jeff? What about something, I'll rephrase it, cool project and some project that you had challenges with, right? Because you've been doing a lot of projects over time, and then what do you do? I know you're a big sports fan, so not like that you don't own a team almost, but I'm sure that the Astros is somewhere in there in your mind, right?
It's probably a better time to be a Pittsburgh Penguin fan than a Houston Astro fan these days. But
I'm sure you're very proud about your Astros. If you guys ever watch an Astros game, you might see when they're in home base in Houston, you might see Jeff behind the catcher because you guys, a lot of us have seen him there right on TV, right? You're a proud fan.
yeah, you got to be careful about what you do in that seat. But let's see, exciting. As Laura said, the first project I worked, again, out of school, I worked as a project manager, and it's almost a little eerie about how tied in you get with those projects. I mean, many of you in this room know that, but it becomes part of you, and so that's always exciting. I would say some of the things that we are doing as a firm now that are exciting, and we've got a lot of big, exciting projects that would sort of be what you'd think of for Heinz projects, big 50-story plus office buildings or various other kinds of buildings in New York, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Houston, Paris, Germany, Milan. But I'd say one of the most interesting, and Laura sort of alluded to it, we're really looking strongly at mixed-use projects that are, a little more suburban node than urban node, where you create public spaces and you really activate them. I mean, it really takes a lot of effort and it has to be done right. But if you can activate the space, the office rents, the multifamily rents you get, and we've proven it, it's happened, you can get like a 30% premium on that. So really by sort of the soft side of what we do. So we are working on 3 or 4 projects like that, a lot of them in the Southeast that fall into that camp that I think are very, very exciting, and we're going to be doing, I think, a lot more of that in the future.
And hopefully one of them, we can't say, but hopefully one of them in the vicinity of the South Florida or in South Florida. So
yeah, right.
I hope the team is, making sure that it happens. They're sitting back there.
Right.
So, and then in terms of fun, I know you sports, you had your little scuba diving experiences.
Yeah, yeah, I had a little scuba diving. I got a little case of the bends a couple of months ago, but I like to play golf. I do play golf. And bridge is sort of a passion. And just as a family, we're sort of game junkies, so we play lots.
He just started teaching me bridge. It is very hard.
Well, it's harder than teaching you real estate, probably. Okay, I think we're out of time. I don't know, Nitin, you're coming up.
We have one question from the audience that we wanted to ask you, and it's the W word. We work.
World Center?
World Center, of course. That's a positive one, so we'll start with that one. But the second has to do with WeWork,
Yeah.
And I have some inkling as to your thoughts on that, but trying to understand Heinz' perspective
Right.
On WeWork and just really co-working in general.
Yeah.
How that, as you mentioned earlier, Jeff, how that's changed the business. So love your perspective.
And we happen to have 15 or 17 leases with WeWork, so we're both an owner with leases, and we're also creating our own space. So you can
Right. I mean, again, if you'd asked me this question 9 months to a year ago, I would have seen WeWork as a real existential threat. And obviously they did all sorts of things wrong. But I think the one thing they have absolutely proven is that big tenants, not just the sort of tenants that they started with, the 1- and 2-man shops, but the real enterprise tenants, which is our bread and butter, they've really demonstrated that tenant group really values flexibility for some portion of their tenancy. And so we are having to adapt to that. I think providing tenants some flexibility is going to become a necessity for buildings going forward. So we've created our own sort of WeWork-like space. We call it Heinz Squared, and we're starting to put it in many of our buildings around the globe. So it's self-branded, and we're going to operate it, and it's got its own challenges, but we very much think there's a real need and a real demand and a real necessity for that. So we are moving down that road pretty quickly. And we've got some advantages. I mean, we're a global portfolio. If you could offer a tenant the ability to give them a 10-year lease, but also have them have flex space within that same building for them to go, up or down when they needed it, and then to have additional flex space that they could access in your locations around the world, that's a pretty unique thing that you can offer a tenant. So that'd be a way for us to increase alpha. So generally, we are a believer. We are a convert to that system. And I think, as Laura sort of alluded, there's a real desire on the parts of tenants to have the management not stop at their front door. That's the way we always did property management. But there's a real desire to have someone who understands their needs to manage their space in addition to the building. And so this is sort of a way that, again, that's all sort of merging with the shared services and the hospitality, et cetera, and the facilities management. So it's all sort of starting to come together.
Yeah. And I would say, one of our big focuses is really getting close to our tenants, understanding their needs holistically, and flexibility keeps coming up, not just flexibility into flex space, but flexibility in how they design their space, how they use different parts of their space, even uses for the base building space and how they interact with it. I think that's becoming a huge part of what we're thinking about and how we design. One thing that's been a challenge, I would say, when it comes to flexible workspace, if you will, is that, and I think one of the big reasons that WeWork is where it is that it went directly into direct leases, and that was what the market demanded. That was how they did it. Obviously, now they are where they are. As Dad said, I think that flex space is going to become, I would say, a required amenity at office buildings, and in some form or fashion. And in order to make that work, that really is probably a management agreement, not a direct lease. And I think the reason to do it is you have the ability to attract tenants that are looking for ways to, stay flexible in the space that they take. Hopefully you're able to keep tenants and make them stickier once they're there. So just like many other amenities in your building, it becomes critical. And then, with the upside as well, I think where the capital markets are, there's a gap there. And I think we're sitting in the middle of that gap a little bit, what our tenants are demanding and what our investors are willing to do. So, I think how quickly that gap closes is will be interesting to watch.
Great. Well, thank you. Please join me in giving a round of applause to our incredible panel. And having had the pleasure of spending time now with the regeneration of Hines and some of their executives like Alfonso, Michael Harrison, and others, I can tell you globally that such an extraordinary company should all be so proud of, and we're honored to have you as part of Miami World Center. So thank you for being here and supporting the university. Thank you, Jack. So I know a lot of you thought it was time for cocktails, but by popular demand, we're going to do a 2-hour dissertation on the coronavirus. So stay tuned. But in seriousness, this conference, we appreciate another successful year. This is year 9. Would not be possible without the incredible staff and team that work tirelessly. So thank you to both schools and all of those that make this happen, including Chuck and Andrea, who really bear the brunt of it. One of the things we're most proud of, both on the real estate board, the business school, now the law school, the construction management, is this interdisciplinary nature. As was alluded to on the panel, not only has real estate become mixed use, but really our industry just continues to tie in every angle. There's no clear line between construction, development, finance, legal. It all blends together, especially to make developers of today. And I think that's one of the things the university is working so hard on. And I'm very honored and proud to be a part of this process because we are really one seamless organization, which benefits our students, brings better talent for all of you and your companies. So please continue to try to get engaged with our students. Internships, jobs are available. And thank you for your support because money from this conference does go to further those efforts. So with that, drinks on us. Please head out to the Palm Court.